next. A flood evacuation warning remains in place this morning for multiple communities along Hobart's Derwent River, and tens of thousands of properties remain without power after days of wild weather across Australia's southeast. In Tasmania, communities remain isolated and several properties have been inundated by flood borders, including Law Rennie Estate Distillery.
While in Victoria, severe weather warnings have been cancelled. However, dozens of roads are still cut off and drivers are being urged to take care. Reporter Selena Ross is in New Norfolk for us this morning. Steph Ferrier's in Melbourne. Good morning, both. Kicking off with you, Selena. What's been happening there overnight in the Derwent Valley?
Good morning, Michael. We are thankfully starting to see a bit of a reprieve here in the weather. It has started to ease off now after quite a really sustained period that we've been seeing over the past week. That's prompted us to come and explore a little bit further out. So we've actually moved from New Norfolk up to the neighbouring area of Lachlan. Here, we're kind of up in the hills now, and the ground, even though we're in these elevated areas, is still so sodden and wet from all that rain that's been coming. There was water cascading down this hill behind me a couple of days ago that spilt over a dam that's just over here, and then that spilled over onto the road that cut off access for properties that were up the hill over here, so they were isolated there. And that's been the case for quite a few of the communities around this area, around the Derwent. We have a little visitor on the camera here. We're on a property where there's an animal rescue, so we'll be talking to the owner a little bit later. But it really has just been a massive night as well. The Meadowbank Dam reached record flood levels, a record of 8 metres, and that stayed at the major flood level for between the hours of midday and midnight yesterday. So it really was quite a sustained period that it was over that major flood level. We heard from the Tasmania's Premier, Jeremy Rockcliffe, a little earlier, and here's a bit of what he had to say.
We will assess the damage over the course of the next 24 hours and to go from there. Most importantly, we're looking for an out for people in isolated communities, ensuring that people have food. That food relief is very important. We understand there are some people in isolated communities that without power for a long time, and so we need to ensure that we support those people in those communities doing it tough.
So yes, there is still this ongoing need for people to take care, to show caution. There is still issues in terms of power outages, telephone outages, internet outages. Crews are still working to try to do their best to get all those services back on track. So hopefully it won't be too much longer, but it still could be days before some people are fully back on deck.
Camera hogs everywhere, Selena. Photobombed by cows. Now you've lived.
I think it's the first time my trousers have been eaten by a cow while on air.
There's a first for everything. Hey, let's go to Steph now. Things seem to be calming down there.
Yeah, certainly I can't top that, Michael. But as you can see behind me, the clean-up job still has a very long way to go. This is a cafe that really was reduced to rubble after those winds ripped through this area late on Sunday night. The SES says that there are just over 400 active jobs still remaining out of more than 4,700 calls for help since 7 p.m. Sunday night. And more than 3,300 of those are for trees down, more than 1,300 for building damage like this behind me. And we've heard from the SES that they've actually got some reinforcements now. They've got some ground crew from New South Wales. About 29 people have just arrived across the border after midnight. They're going to be mainly helping in some of those worst affected areas like Gippsland in Victoria's east, and also in the southern metropolitan area with Frankston, for example, really taking a battering. But earlier on we heard from Miriam Bradbury. She's a senior meteorologist at the Bureau of Meteorology, and she said that the most intense period was on that Sunday afternoon and evening when that front really ripped through much of the southeast, including major parts of Melbourne. This is what she had to say.
We saw some very significant gusts as it moved through, with many locations, particularly through southern and central Victoria, seeing their highest wind gust for September. So that included places like Fawkner Beacon around the Port Phillip Bay area, which got up to 141 kilometres an hour. We had 121 kilometres an hour at St Kilda, not a September record there, but still incredibly strong as that front came through. But it was more widespread than that. Wangaratta got up to 98 kilometres an hour, the strongest wind gust up that far north.
Miriam Bradbury there, a senior meteorologist at the Bureau, and we've heard that 41,000 homes and properties still remain without power around the state. AusNet spokesperson, and that's AusNet, it covers mostly the eastern part of the state, they have said that this is the longest, most severe weather outage basically that the network has ever faced. Hillsville, for example, which is northeast of Melbourne, that town is listed as being a critical outage point, and around 28 homes aren't likely to see power restored until tomorrow night at the very least. Now, while some of those really severe warnings have now been cancelled, things like the coastal hazard warnings where we saw 8-metre swells down in Portland in Victoria's southwest, there are still gale warnings, and the Bureau and the SES are both gearing up and bracing for the next major front that's expected tomorrow afternoon.
OK, Steph, thank you. And Selena, we'll be coming back to you and your bovine friends very shortly on the show.
Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remains defiant in the face of massive internal pressure, calling for him to make a hostage release deal with Hamas inside Gaza. Even the US president's confessed he believes Mr Netanyahu isn't doing enough to make a deal. Middle East correspondent Alison Horn has been at the protests in Tel Aviv.
For the second day in a row, Israelis have taken to the streets to shut down areas in central Tel Aviv in these mass anti-government protests. You can hear them shouting in anger and frustration. They've come out in their thousands to protest against the government, and what they say is a lack of progress on hostage release negotiations in Gaza. Some of these people blame the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, for the deaths of 6 hostages whose bodies were recovered this week from Gaza. Hostages which the military says were alive until just days before their bodies were found. Now, this development has really propelled hundreds of thousands of people to try to shut down Israel, to pressure the government to make a hostage release deal with Hamas, no matter the price. And they accuse the Prime Minister of prioritising revenge in Gaza over the hostages' lives.
These are innocent people that were abducted from the place that was supposed to be the most safe for them. So we've been here and we feel heartbroken. Our government does not see us.
Terrible. Terrible, terrible. They need to go, and we need another government here.
Well, it's not only here in Israel that there's criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, has also said that he doesn't believe Mr Netanyahu is doing everything he can to make a hostage release deal, which is quite a damning statement in itself. Benjamin Netanyahu has defended his actions, vowing to continue the war and to keep his troops inside the Gaza Strip.
The Philadelphia corridor, this is the oxygen and armament of Hamas.
There's such a sense of grief and shock and loss and anger here, but there's also a determination. These people say this is more than about the hostages, it's about the future of their country and what they want Israel to be.
Alison Horn reporting. Back home, a teenager has been charged with a terrorism-related offence by the Queensland Joint Counter-Terrorism Team. The Australian Federal Police says the boy was charged with 1 count of acts done in preparation for or planning terrorist acts. The AFP says there is no current threat to public safety.
The family of a teenage boy missing off the South Australian coast has been anxiously waiting for news of their son and brother. Authorities will return to the water off Victor Harbor this morning as they search for 16-year-old Mehdi Habibi, who was posing for a photo when he was struck by a large wave on Granite Island on Sunday. Search and rescue crews continued their search into the early evening yesterday, but were hampered by dangerous weather conditions.
The Liberal Party's federal executive meets today to discuss a potential takeover of the New South Wales division. The special meeting was called weeks ago in the wake of the party's nomination shambles that saw 140 Liberal candidates left off the ballot for next month's local government elections. Opposition leader Peter Dutton's previously said all options are on the table. The Bruce Highway is expected to reopen tonight, 5 days after a fiery truck crash left the highway severely damaged. The section of highway between Gingin and Calliope has been closed since Friday morning following a truck crash that killed one person and a subsequent explosion. The Transport and Main Roads Department says it's working to reopen a single lane of the highway under traffic control by midnight tonight.
The United Workers Union is calling for Dreamworld to stop animal handlers entering tiger enclosures in the wake of yesterday's attack. A 47-year-old female animal handler was taken to hospital in a stable condition with serious cuts and puncture wounds after being bitten by a tiger at the theme park. Most zoos and sanctuaries no longer allow handlers to have direct contact with the big cats because they are highly territorial.
A Kakadu National Park tour guide operator says something needs to be changed at a popular crocodile viewing spot or it risks being shut down. In recent weeks, video like this has emerged of tourists standing at the edge of water at Carl's Crossing despite signs warning of the presence of dozens of saltwater crocs. Tour guides calling for local rangers to be deployed at the crossing to change tourist behaviour and prevent an attack.